The Watcher in the Woods. On the outskirts of a small town, there was a dense forest known for its eerie stillness. Legends of the forest dated back centuries, with locals whispering about a mysterious figure known as the Watcher. It was said that those who entered the forest after dark would never return the same, if they returned at all. One cold autumn evening, a group of friends, Sarah, Mark, Lisa, and Tom, decided to test the legend. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they ventured into the forest, determined to prove that the Watcher was just a myth. As they walked deeper into the woods, the canopy above thickened, and the light from the setting sun barely penetrated the gloom. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. Even the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves ceased. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea," Lisa whispered, clutching Mark's arm. "Don't be such a scaredy cat," Mark replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's just a bunch of old stories." Sarah led the way, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "We're almost at the heart of the forest. If we're going to see anything, it'll be there." As they pressed on, a feeling of being watched settled over them, growing stronger with each step. Shadows seemed to move just out of sight, and the trees appeared to close in around them. Suddenly, Tom stopped. "Did you hear that?" Everyone fell silent, straining to listen. First, there was nothing. Then, a soft, rhythmic whispering floated through the air. It was unintelligible but undeniably human. It seemed to come from all directions at once. "Let's get out of here," Sarah said, her voice trembling. They turned to retrace their steps, but the path they had followed was gone, replaced by a maze of identical trees. Panic set in. "Which way do we go?" Lisa cried. Mark tried to use his phone's GPS, but there was no signal. "We're lost," he said, his voice hollow. As they debated their next move, the whispering grew louder, more insistent. The air around them grew colder still, and the darkness seemed to thicken. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced menacingly. Then Sarah saw it, a figure standing just at the edge of the light. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed a sickly yellow. Its mouth moved, producing the whispering that now filled their ears. "The Watcher," she breathed, unable to look away. The figure raised a skeletal hand and pointed at them. The whispering became a cacophony, echoing their deepest fears. Terrified, they ran in the opposite direction, but no matter how far they went, the Watcher seemed always to be just a step behind. Their flight through the forest was frantic and disoriented. The trees seemed to twist and contort, blocking their path. They stumbled and fell, their hearts pounding in their chests. Finally, they burst into a small clearing, gasping for breath. The whispering had stopped, and the Watcher was nowhere to be seen. For a moment they thought they were safe, but then the ground beneath them began to shift. Dark roots snaked out of the earth, wrapping around their ankles and pulling them down. They screamed, struggling to free themselves, but it was no use. The Watcher appeared at the edge of the clearing, its yellow eyes glowing brighter. It approached slowly, its skeletal fingers reaching out. One by one, the friends were dragged into the earth, their screams muffled by the soil. The last thing they saw was the Watcher, standing over them, whispering their names. When the townsfolk went looking for the missing friends the next day, they found nothing but an empty clearing. No sign of a struggle, no footprints, just an eerie silence that seemed to hang in the air. And from that day on, the legend of the Watcher grew, with more and more people claiming to see a gaunt figure with glowing yellow eyes at the edge of the forest. Those who ventured too close would hear their names whispered on the wind, a chilling reminder of the friends who had dared to enter the woods and never returned. The forest, it seemed, had claimed them as its own, and the Watcher continued to stand guard, waiting for the next unwary souls to enter his domain. The Haunting of Willow Lane. Sarah had always been a night owl. The quiet of the night provided her the peace she needed to work on her novels. She recently moved to an old Victorian house on Willow Lane, drawn by its charm and seclusion. The neighbors had warned her about the house, whispering about its dark history, but Sarah dismissed their tales as mere superstition. One rainy night, Sarah sat in her dimly lit study, the soft glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. She was deeply engrossed in her writing when she heard a faint sound, like a whisper, coming from the hallway. She paused, listening intently. The house was old and prone to making noises, she reassured herself. A few minutes later, the whispering grew louder. Sarah's heart began to race. She stood up, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. With her phone's flashlight in hand, she cautiously stepped into the hallway. The light cast long, eerie shadows on the walls. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. No response, just the steady whispering, growing louder, more insistent. Sarah followed the sound to the staircase leading to the attic. The whispers seemed to emanate from behind the closed attic door. She hesitated, remembering the warnings about the house. Gathering her courage, she opened the door. The creaking hinges echoed through the hallway. The attic was cold and dark, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. Dust particles danced in the beam of her flashlight. The whispers were now clearer, almost like voices. Sarah could make out faint phrases, though their meanings eluded her. Suddenly, she felt a cold breeze brush past her, sending chills down her spine. She turned around, shining her flashlight frantically. The beam landed on an old mirror in the corner of the attic. Sarah approached it cautiously, her breath visible in the cold air. In the reflection, she saw something move behind her. She spun around, but there was nothing. Her heartbeat quickened as she turned back to the mirror. This time, she saw a figure standing behind her. A woman in a tattered dress, her face pale and eyes hollow. The woman reached out to Sarah, her mouth moving in silent whispers. Sarah screamed and stumbled backward, dropping her flashlight. The attic plunged into darkness. She fumbled for the flashlight, her hands trembling. When she finally found it and turned it back on, the figure was gone. Breathing heavily, Sarah decided she had seen enough. She hurried down the stairs, the whispers now replaced by eerie silence. She locked the attic door and returned to her study, her hands still shaking. She tried to continue writing, but her mind kept drifting back to the attic. The woman's hollow eyes haunted her thoughts. Unable to concentrate, Sarah decided to research the house's history. She discovered that a woman named Eliza had lived there over a century ago. Eliza had gone mad after losing her husband and child in a tragic accident. She was said to have spent her last days locked in the attic, whispering to herself until she died. The realization sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. The whispers, the figure in the mirror, it all made sense now. Eliza's tormented spirit was still trapped in the attic, seeking someone to listen to her sorrowful whispers. Determined to help, Sarah returned to the attic the next night. She set up a camera and a digital recorder, hoping to communicate with Eliza. As the night wore on, the whispers began again. This time, Sarah listened carefully, trying to make out the words. She could hear Eliza's pain, her longing for her lost family. "Rest in peace," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "Your suffering is over." The whispers gradually faded, replaced by a calm silence. Sarah felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from the house. She reviewed the recording the next day and found that it had captured Eliza's final words, "Thank you." From that night on, the house on Willow Lane was peaceful. Sarah continued her writing, knowing she had helped a tormented soul find peace. And whenever she heard the wind howling outside, she smiled, knowing Eliza was finally at rest.